Sometimes the smallest act of kindness can change everything. Eli Navarro worked double shifts at the auto shop, came home to help his 7-year-old daughter Maya with homework, and fell asleep counting bills he couldn't pay. It was a simple life in their quiet coastal town, built on love and held together by determination. On a freezing February night, when he saw a woman shivering outside the all-night diner, Eli didn't hesitate. He gave her his only warm jacket and drove away before she could thank him. By dawn, 10 helicopters circled his house like mechanical vultures. Security teams, news crews, and corporate executives swarmed his front yard. The woman he'd helped wasn't homeless at all. She was Aurora Vega, a missing billionaire aerospace genius whose emergency beacon had been sewn into his jacket. But here's what nobody expected. How would a single father's act of compassion completely upend the ruthless world of corporate power? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm clock's shrill cry cut through the pre-dawn darkness at 5:30 a.m., just as it had every weekday for the past 3 years. Eli Navarro's calloused hand found the snooze button with practiced precision, allowing himself exactly 9 more minutes before the real day began. In the narrow hallway of their modest 2-bedroom rental, he paused outside Maya's door, listening for the soft rhythm of her breathing that told him she was still peacefully asleep. Their little house on Maple Street had seen better decades. The hardwood floors creaked in familiar places, the kitchen faucet required a specific twist to stop its dripping, and the furnace made concerning noises that Eli pretended not to hear. But it was their soar, at least. It felt like theirs, after 3 years of rent payments that stretched his paycheck to breaking point. The walls were covered with Maya's artwork, crayon drawings of fantastical flying machines, colorful portraits of their small family, and elaborate maps of imaginary kingdoms where dragons were friendly and everyone had enough to eat. Maya's drawing journal lay open on the coffee table, revealing her latest creation, a detailed sketch of a house with wings, complete with propellers and a rainbow trail. "So we can fly to see Mama in heaven," she'd explained the night before, her 7-year-old logic as pure as it was heartbreaking. Eli had learned to smile through these moments, to celebrate her imagination, while privately wondering if he was doing enough to help her process the grief that still shadowed their lives. Elena had been gone for 18 months now. The cancer had taken her quickly, which the doctors said was a mercy, though Eli struggled to find mercy in watching his wife fade away, while their daughter asked questions he couldn't answer. Maya had been only 5 when Elena died, old enough to understand that Mama wasn't coming back, but too young to grasp the finality of it all. Sometimes Eli caught her setting an extra place at their small kitchen table, or saving the last bite of her favorite snacks for when Mama gets home. The auto shop where Eli worked sat on the edge of Millhaven, a coastal town that had once thrived on fishing and tourism, but now survived on stubbornness and the kindness of neighbors who looked out for each other. Pacific Coast Auto Repair wasn't much to look at a converted warehouse with oil stains that had achieved permanent status on the concrete floor and a collection of tools that Eli maintained with religious devotion. But under the hood of every car that rolled through those bay doors, Eli found a kind of peace that eluded him everywhere else. His hands understood engines in a way that transcended formal training. While other mechanics consulted manuals and diagnostic computers, Eli listened to the subtle rhythms of pistons and valves, feeling for the heartbeat of each machine. It was a gift he'd discovered in high school shop class, nurtured through a brief stint at community college before Elena's pregnancy had redirected his priorities toward immediate employment and steady paychecks. "You could have been an engineer," Elena used to tell him when she'd find him sketching improvements to engine designs on napkins at the kitchen table. "Still could be, you know. But engineering school required time and money they didn't have, and Maya needed stability more than she needed a father chasing dreams." The morning routine unfolded with military precision. Coffee first strong enough to wake the dead, Elena used to joke-a-thon a quick shower while mentally reviewing the day's repair schedule. By 6:45, he was gently shaking Maya awake. Her dark curls splayed across the pillow like spilled ink. She had Elena's eyes, warm brown with flecks of gold that caught the light when she laughed. "Good morning, sunshine," Eli whispered, smoothing her hair away from her face. "Time to rise and conquer the world." Maya's response was a theatrical groan that would have impressed a Broadway actor, followed by the negotiation phase of their morning ritual. 5 more minutes became 3, which became, "Okay, but I'm not happy about it," which inevitably led to her bounding out of bed with the sudden energy that only children possessed. Breakfast was a careful balance of nutrition and expedience. Oatmeal with a spoonful of strawberry jam shaped like a smiley face, orange juice diluted just enough to make it last longer, and vitamins disguised as magic energy pills that would help her brain work better at school. Maya chattered through the meal, recounting elaborate dreams about flying elephants and underwater cities, her imagination filling their small kitchen with wonder that made Eli forget, temporarily, about the stack of bills waiting on his bedroom dresser. Mrs. Rodriguez next door had become their unofficial family guardian angel. The retired teacher appeared on their doorstep exactly at 7:30 each morning, ready to walk Maya to school and keep her occupied until Eli returned from work. She refused payment for this service, claiming that Maya's company was payment enough, though Eli made sure to keep her freezer stocked with homemade meals whenever he could manage it. "Buenos dias, mija," Mrs. Rodriguez called through the screen door, her voice carrying the warmth of someone who had spent 40 years teaching children to love learning. Maya rushed to greet her with a hug that could power the neighborhood grid, chattering excitedly about her latest drawing project. Eli grabbed his work jacket from the hook, by the door a sturdy blue canvas jacket with Pacific Coast Auto Repair embroidered over the left chest pocket. Elena had given it to him for Christmas 3 years ago, back when she was still healthy enough to worry about him being warm during the foggy coastal mornings. The jacket had acquired the patina of honest work, permanent stains from various automotive fluids, a small tear near the right elbow from a particularly stubborn exhaust system, and the comforting weight of tools in every pocket. "Don't forget your lunch," Maya called, holding up the brown bag that contained his daily sustenance: 2 peanut butter sandwiches, an apple, and a thermos of coffee that would have to last until dinner. The drive to work took 12 minutes through neighborhoods that told the story of Millhaven's economic journey. Closer to the water, modest Victorian houses spoke of better times, their gingerbread trim and bay windows maintained by retirees who remembered when the fishing boats came in heavy with their catch. Further inland, where Eli lived, the architecture grew more practical and the yards smaller, populated by working families who measured success in terms of keeping the lights on and the refrigerator stocked. Pacific Coast Auto Repair occupied a corner lot that had once housed a fish cannery. The building's bones were solid, its high ceilings and thick walls built to last, but the conversion to an auto shop had been done on a budget that showed in every detail. The waiting area featured mismatched chairs arranged around a coffee table covered with magazines, so old they qualified as historical documents. A small television in the corner played morning news at a volume calculated not to wake the dead. Eli's boss, Frank Castellanos, had owned the shop for 15 years, ever since his own dreams of expansion had collided with the reality of small-town economics. Frank was a good man who paid fair wages when he could, and looked the other way when Eli occasionally used the shop's tools for side projects. At 62, Frank talked constantly about retirement, but couldn't quite bring himself to trust the business to anyone else. "Morning, Eli." Frank called from beneath the hood of a 1998 Honda Civic that had seen better decades. "Got a transmission that's making sounds like a dying whale. Think you can work your magic on it?" The diagnostic process revealed what Eli had suspected from Frank's description. The transmission wasn't dying, it was practically deceased. But replacing it would cost more than the car was worth, and the owner, Mrs. Chen from the flower shop, couldn't afford a newer vehicle. Eli spent the morning crafting a repair solution that would give the transmission another year of life, maybe two if Mrs. Chen was gentle with it. This was the part of his job that Eli loved, most the puzzle-solving aspect that challenged him to find creative solutions within impossible constraints. Every repair was a negotiation between what was ideal and what was possible, between engineering perfection and economic reality. He approached each challenge with the methodical patience of someone who understood that rushing led to mistakes, and mistakes led to callbacks that the shop couldn't afford. Lunch break found him sitting in the small break room, sketching modifications to a carburetor design while eating his peanut butter sandwich. The margins of his notebook were filled with similar drawings improvements to everything from brake systems to engine mounts. Ideas that would never see production but satisfied some deep creative need that the routine repairs couldn't touch. "You ever think about starting your own place?" asked Tommy, the shop's youngest mechanic, a 23-year-old who still believed that talent alone could overcome any obstacle. Eli looked up from his sketch, considering the question that had occurred to him countless times over the years. "Starting a business takes capital I don't have, and time I can't spare. Maya needs stability more than she needs a father playing entrepreneur." But even as he said it, Eli knew the real answer was more complicated. Fear played a role, fear of failure, fear of losing what little security he'd managed to build, fear of proving that Elena's faith in his abilities had been misplaced. It was easier to excel within the safety of someone else's business than to risk everything on his own vision. The afternoon brought a steady stream of customers, each with their own automotive crisis that needed solving. Eli moved through the repairs with quiet efficiency, his hands working automatically, while his mind wandered to Maya's school play next week, the rent increase notice that had arrived yesterday, and the persistent knocking sound in his own truck's engine that he kept meaning to investigate. At 5:30, he clocked out and made the familiar drive home, stopping at the small grocery store to pick up ingredients for dinner. The produce section always made him think of Elena, who had possessed an almost supernatural ability to select the perfect avocado or identify the sweetest melon in the bin. Eli's grocery shopping was more functional, whatever was on sale, and would feed them both for the week. Maya burst through Mrs. Rodriguez's front door like a cannonball, full of stories about her day at school. She'd learned about clouds in science class and was convinced she could build a machine to catch them. Her drawing journal had acquired several new sketches during lunch period, including a detailed blueprint for a cloud-catching net that would somehow be attached to their house. Dinner was spaghetti with meat sauce from a jar, garlic bread made from day-old rolls, and green beans that Maya picked at while negotiating for dessert privileges. They ate at the small kitchen table, Maya's chatter filling the space where Elena's voice used to be. Eli had learned to ask the right questions to keep her talking about her friends, her teacher, the books she was reading, because her voice helped quiet the loneliness that crept in during the silent moments. After dinner came homework time, with Maya sprawled on the living room floor surrounded by textbooks and colored pencils. Eli helped where he could, though her second-grade math problems sometimes required more concentration than rebuilding an engine. Her reading homework revealed a natural storyteller's instinct, her voice rising and falling with the drama of simple stories about talking animals and magical adventures. Bath time was a negotiation, bedtime was a diplomatic summit, and story time was the sacred ritual that ended each day. Tonight, Maya requested the continuing adventures of Captain Sparkles, the brave space explorer who happened to be a 7-year-old girl with the power to fix any broken spaceship with her magic wrench. The story had been running for months now, with Maya contributing plot twists and character developments that kept Eli on his creative toes. "Will Captain Sparkles ever meet her mama again?" Maya asked as Eli tucked her under the covers, her question delivered with the casual tone children used for earth-shattering inquiries. Eli smoothed her hair and considered his answer carefully. "Captain Sparkles knows her mama is always with her, even when she's exploring distant galaxies. Love doesn't disappear just because people have to go on different adventures." Maya nodded solemnly, processing this information with the seriousness of a philosopher. Like how Mama's still with us even though she's in heaven. Exactly like that, Eli confirmed, kissing her forehead. Sweet dreams, sunshine. The evening hours belonged to Eli, alone time, to pay bills, do laundry, and sit at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and his sketchbook. Tonight he found himself drawing modifications to helicopter rotors, inspired by Maya's fascination with flying machines. The design that emerged was elegant in its simplicity, a rotor system that could theoretically provide more lift with less noise and vibration. It was past midnight when Eli finally closed the sketchbook and prepared for bed. Tomorrow would bring another day of routine repairs and careful budgeting, another day of being the sole provider and protector for the small person who depended on him for everything. The responsibility was overwhelming when he let himself think about it too directly, but it was also the source of a strength he hadn't known he possessed. As he hung his work jacket on the hook by the door, Eli couldn't have imagined that within hours, that simple piece of clothing would become the catalyst for the most extraordinary chapter of their quiet lives. The jacket that had kept him warm through countless foggy mornings, that carried the scent of honest work and Elena's memory, was about to connect him to a world he'd never dreamed of entering. But for now, it was just a jacket hanging on a hook. And Eli Navarro was just a single father preparing for another ordinary day in their carefully constructed, preciously protected little life. The sound that woke Eli at 6:47 a.m. wasn't his alarm clock. It was the deep, rhythmic thrumming of helicopter rotors, growing louder by the second. He lay in bed for a moment, convinced he was dreaming, until the windows began to rattle with the approaching aircraft. Maya appeared in his doorway, her hair tousled with sleep, clutching her stuffed elephant. "Daddy, what's that noise?" Before Eli could answer, the first helicopter passed directly over their house, so low that the downwash from its rotors shook the entire structure. Then came another, and another. The sound was deafening, a mechanical thunder that seemed to swallow all other noise. Eli stumbled to the window and pulled back the curtain. What he saw defied comprehension. His quiet street, Maple Street, where the most exciting event was usually Mrs. Patterson's weekly garden club meeting, had been transformed into something resembling a military operation. Helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures, their spotlights cutting through the early morning fog. Black SUVs lined both sides of the street, their occupants emerging with purpose and expensive equipment. "Stay back from the window, Maya," Eli said, his voice tight with confusion and growing alarm. He counted helicopters 7, 8, 9, with a 10th landing in the small park across the street, its rotors creating a windstorm that sent newspapers and trash swirling through the air like urban tumbleweeds. The front yard that yesterday had featured Maya's chalk hopscotch game and his attempt at a vegetable garden was now crowded with people who clearly didn't belong in this neighborhood. Men in dark suits spoke urgently into earpieces. Women in designer clothes tested television cameras. Security personnel with visible weapons established a perimeter around his property. "Mr. Navarro," someone shouted through a megaphone, "this is Agent Torres with the FBI. We need to speak with you immediately." FBI? Eli's mind raced through every possible reason federal agents might want to talk to him. His taxes were current, if barely. He'd never been arrested for anything more serious than a speeding ticket. The most exciting thing he'd done recently was give a stranger his jacket, and that hardly seemed like federal crime material. Maya pressed against his side, her small body trembling. "Are we in trouble, Daddy?" "No, sunshine, we're not in trouble." Eli hoped he was telling the truth. "But we need to stay inside until I figure out what's happening." His phone, which had been mercifully silent all morning, suddenly erupted with notifications. Text messages, missed calls, voicemail sold from numbers he didn't recognize. The first message he opened made his blood run cold. "Channel 7 News here. We understand you're connected to the Aurora Vega disappearance. Can we get a statement?" Aurora Vega. The name was vaguely familiar, something he might have heard on the news, but he couldn't place it. How could he be connected to anyone's disappearance when the most interesting person he'd met recently was the homeless woman at the diner last night. The woman at the diner. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The shivering woman in the thin sweater who'd looked so grateful when he'd given her his jacket. She'd tried to thank him, but he'd driven away before she could speak. Could she possibly be this Aurora Vega person everyone was looking for? Another message appeared on his phone. "Mr. Navarro, this is Rebecca Chang from the Los Angeles Times. Our sources indicate Aurora Vega's emergency beacon was activated at your address. Can you confirm your relationship with Miss Vega?" Emergency beacon. The phrase made everything click into horrible focus. His jacket, the jacket Elena had given him, the jacket he wore every day to work, the jacket he'd given to a stranger, without a second thought, must have had some kind of tracking device in it. A knock at the front door interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Not the polite rap of a neighbor or delivery person, but the authoritative pounding of someone accustomed to having doors opened immediately. "Mr. Navarro, we really need to speak with you," came a woman's voice through the door. "I'm Agent Torres. We're not here to arrest you, but we do need to understand what happened last night." Eli looked down at Maya, who was now clinging to his pajama pants with both hands. Her eyes were wide with the kind of fear that children shouldn't have to experience, and he felt a surge of protective anger that someone had brought this chaos to their doorstep. "Stay here, Maya. Don't open any doors. Don't answer the phone. I'll be right back." He opened the front door to find himself face to face with a woman in her 40s, wearing a crisp FBI windbreaker over what was obviously an expensive suit. Behind her stood two men who looked like they could bench press his truck, and beyond them the circus continued to grow. "Agent Torres," the woman said, showing her badge. "I apologize for the commotion, Mr. Navarro. We're trying to locate Aurora Vega, and we have reason to believe she may have made contact with you recently." "I don't know anyone named Aurora Vega," Eli said, which was technically true. "But if you're talking about the woman I gave my jacket to last night, then yeah, I met her. She looked cold. I helped her out. That's it." Agent Torres exchanged glances with her colleagues. "Mr. Navarro, Aurora Vega is one of the most sought-after individuals in the country right now. She's a billionaire aerospace engineer who disappeared 3 days ago under suspicious circumstances. Her emergency beacon activated at this address at approximately 11:30 last night. The timeline matched. Eli had gotten home from the diner around 11:45, after stopping to fill up his truck with the last $20 in his checking account. The woman had been sitting on the bench outside the 24-hour diner, hunched over in a thin sweater that was wholly inadequate for February weather on the California coast. "She didn't tell me her name," Eli said. "She barely said anything. She looked homeless, freezing. I gave her my jacket and left. End of story." "Sir, Aurora Vega is worth approximately $12 billion, Agent Torres said gently. "She wasn't homeless, and right now, 6 different organizations are very interested in finding her." As if to illustrate her point, another helicopter passed overhead, this one bearing the logo of a major news network. A van with a satellite dish was setting up across the street, and Eli could see reporters already preparing for live broadcasts with his house as the backdrop. "I need to call my boss," Eli said, suddenly remembering that he was supposed to be at work in an hour. "And Maya needs to get to school." "Mr. Navarro, I'm afraid that's not going to be possible today," Agent Torres said. "We're going to need you to remain available for questioning, and frankly, for your own safety, it would be better if you stayed indoors. The media attention is only going to get worse." Safety? The word sent a chill down Eli's spine. What kind of danger are we talking about here? Before Agent Torres could answer, a commotion erupted near the street. A sleek black sedan had pulled up, and from it emerged a woman who moved with the kind of confidence that commanded attention even in a crowd of federal agents and news crews. She was perhaps 45, with silver-streaked hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and clothes that somehow managed to look both expensive and suitable for manual labor. The woman scanned the crowd until her gaze landed on Eli, and even from 50 feet away, He could see recognition in her eyes. She began walking toward his front door with determined steps, ignoring the agents who moved to intercept her. "That's her," Agent Torres said into her earpiece. "Aurora Vega is on site." Aurora Vega, the billionaire aerospace engineer, the woman who'd been sitting on a bench outside the diner at 11:30 the previous night, wearing a sweater that wouldn't have kept a small dog warm. The woman he'd given his jacket to without asking her name or story. As she approached, Eli could see that she was indeed wearing his jacket, the blue canvas jacket with Pacific Coast Auto Repair embroidered on the chest. It looked different on her, somehow more significant, as if it had been transformed from a simple work garment into something with actual importance. "Mr. Navarro," she called out as she reached the edge of his front yard, "I need to speak with you. There are things you need to understand." Agent Torres stepped between them. "Ms. Vega, you're going to need to come with us for debriefing. There are a lot of people looking for you." Aurora's eyes never left Eli's face. "The people looking for me are the reason I was sitting on that bench last night. This man saved my life, Agent Torres. The least I can do is explain why his world just got turned upside down." Maya appeared at Eli's side, having apparently decided that her father's instructions to stay inside were less important than her curiosity about the woman wearing Daddy's jacket. Aurora's expression softened when she saw the little girl, and she crouched down to Maya's eye level despite the chaos surrounding them. "You must be Maya," Aurora said. "Your father told me about you last night. He said you like to draw flying machines." Maya nodded solemnly, still processing the surreal scene playing out in her front yard. "Are you really worth $12 billion? Aurora smiled, the first genuine smile Eli had seen from anyone since this circus began. "On paper, yes. In reality, it's complicated. But what's not complicated is that your father is the kindest person I've met in a very long time, and I owe him an explanation." Agent Torres looked like she wanted to object, but Aurora was already standing and addressing Eli directly. 5 minutes. That's all I need to explain what's happening and why it's happening. Then I'll go with the agents and try to get this chaos away from your home." Eli looked at his daughter, who was watching the proceedings with the fascination of someone attending her first circus. He thought about his quiet job at the auto shop, his carefully maintained routine, the simple life he'd built to protect Maya from exactly this kind of upheaval. But he also thought about the woman on the bench last night, the genuine gratitude in her eyes when he'd given her his jacket, the way she'd tried to thank him before he'd driven away. Whatever was happening here, it had started with a simple act of kindness, and kindness deserved an explanation. 5 minutes, he agreed, but then I want everyone off my street and my daughter's life back to normal. Aurora nodded, and for a moment, the weight of her gratitude was visible in her expression. "Thank you, Eli, for the jacket, for listening, and for reminding me that there are still good people in the world." As they walked toward his front door, past the FBI agents and news crews and corporate representatives, Eli couldn't help but wonder how a single act of compassion had managed to attract so much attention. What he didn't yet understand was that his simple kindness had just set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about his own capabilities, his future, and the power of human connection in a world that had forgotten how to trust. Inside the relative sanctuary of his living room, Aurora Vega looked around at Maya's drawings covering the walls with an expression of genuine wonder. She paused at a particularly elaborate sketch of a helicopter with butterfly wings, studying it with the intensity of someone who understood aerodynamics. "Maya, this design is actually quite sophisticated," Aurora said, pointing to the rotor configuration. "You've instinctively solved a stability problem that gives real engineers headaches." Maya beamed with pride, temporarily forgetting the chaos outside. "Daddy says I have a good imagination." "Your daddy's right." Aurora settled onto the couch, still wearing Eli's jacket like a badge of honor. Through the window, they could see Agent Torres coordinating with her team, clearly giving them space but maintaining a watchful presence. Eli sat across from Aurora. Maya nestled between them, and waited for an explanation that could make sense of the morning's events. "My name is Aurora Vega," she began, "and until 3 days ago, I was the CEO of Vega Aerospace Industries. We specialize in revolutionary aircraft, designed specifically vertical lift aircraft that can operate in disaster zones where traditional helicopters can't function safely." She pulled out her phone and showed them a photo of sleek, futuristic aircraft that looked like they belonged in one of Maya's more ambitious drawings. "These prototypes can carry twice the payload of conventional helicopters while generating half the noise and requiring minimal landing space. They're designed for humanitarian missions, delivering medical supplies to earthquake zones, evacuating flood victims, bringing clean water to remote areas." Eli studied the images with a mechanic's eye for detail. The engineering was elegant, clearly the work of someone who understood both the theoretical and practical aspects of flight. "What does this have to do with you sitting on a bench at midnight?" Aurora's expression darkened. 3 days ago, my board of directors staged a coup. Led by my former business partner, Richard Blackwood, they voted me out of my own company and seized control of all my aircraft designs. They claimed I was unstable, obsessed with humanitarian applications instead of profitable military contracts. She swiped to another photo: corporate documents with official seals. "This is a court order freezing my assets, restraining me from accessing my own research facilities, and barring me from discussing my proprietary technology with anyone. Blackwood had me declared mentally incompetent based on testimony from a psychiatrist I've never met." Maya looked confused by the adult complexities, but Eli understood the implications immediately. "They stole your company." "Legally, yes. Morally, absolutely." Aurora's voice carried the weight of betrayal and frustration. "But what they didn't know is that I've been preparing for this possibility for months. I had suspicions about Blackwood's real intentions, Stu, many questions about military applications, too much interest from defense contractors who wanted to weaponize humanitarian technology." She reached into the pocket of Eli's jacket and withdrew a small device about the size of a smartphone, its surface covered with blinking lights and tiny switches. "This is an emergency extraction beacon, designed for use by pilots in hostile territory. I had it sewn into clothing I kept in my personal vehicle, programmed to activate if I was ever in genuine danger." Eli stared at the device. "And you activated it last night?" "When you gave me your jacket, I was in the process of deciding whether to activate it or just disappear completely. Blackwood had frozen my credit cards, my bank accounts, even my personal driver's license had been suspended, pending the competency hearing. I had nowhere to go, no way to access my resources." Aurora's eyes met his across the coffee table. "But then this stranger appeared and gave me his only warm jacket without asking for anything in return. No questions about who I was or whether I deserved help. Just simple, genuine kindness from someone who clearly had very little to spare." Maya tugged on Aurora's sleeve. "So you were really homeless?" "For 3 days, yes. I slept in my car the first night, but Blackwood's security team found me. The second night I hid in a 24-hour laundromat. Last night I was genuinely desperate when your father found me." Eli felt a surge of anger at the injustice of Aurora's situation, but also growing concern about what this meant for his own family. "Why did the beacon bring everyone here? Shouldn't it have contacted your people?" "That's where it gets complicated." Aurora activated the beacon's display, showing a complex array of tracking data. "The beacon doesn't just alert my extraction team, it sends simultaneous signals to multiple organizations. My loyal employees, yes, but also the FBI, the SEC, several aerospace companies, and unfortunately, Blackwood's corporate security." She gestured toward the window, where the chaos continued to unfold. "Everyone wants to find me, but for very different reasons. My team wants to help me regain control of my company. The government wants to ensure my technology doesn't fall into the wrong hands. And Blackwood's people want to silence me permanently." "Permanently?" Eli's protective instincts flared. "Are you saying we're in actual danger?" Before Aurora could answer, Agent Torres appeared at the front door with an urgent expression. Eli opened it to find her holding a tablet, displaying what appeared to be surveillance footage. "Mr. Navarro, we've identified several individuals in the crowd who aren't media or law enforcement. 3 men with connections to private military contractors, 2 women who work for Blackwood Industries, and at least 1 person we can't identify at all." Aurora stood immediately. "Show me the footage." Agent Torres held up the tablet, revealing a crowd shot of the street. Aurora pointed to a man in an expensive suit standing near one of the news vans. "That's Marcus Webb, Blackwood's head of security. Former Special Forces, now specializes in corporate espionage and asset recovery." "Asset recovery?" Eli asked. "Euphemism for making inconvenient people disappear," Aurora said grimly. "If Webb is here, it means Blackwood isn't content to just steal my company. He wants to ensure I can never challenge the takeover." Maya, who had been following the conversation with growing alarm, suddenly spoke up. "Are the bad men going to hurt Daddy?" The question hung in the air like a physical weight. Aurora knelt beside Maya, her expression serious but gentle. "Maya, I promise you that I will not let anyone hurt your father. But I need to ask both of you to trust me, even though that's a lot to ask from people who just met me." Eli looked out the window at the continuing circus on his street. His neighbors were starting to emerge from their houses, drawn by curiosity and concern. Mrs. Rodriguez stood on her front porch, clearly worried about Maya's safety. The normalcy of his carefully constructed life was dissolving in real time. "What are our options?" he asked. Aurora pulled a second device from the jacket pocket, a small tablet showing various location markers. "I have a secure facility about 2 hours north of here. My most trusted team members are gathered there, along with prototypes that Blackwood doesn't know exist. We could be safe there while we figure out how to fight back." "Or," Eli prompted, "or I turn myself in to federal custody, cooperate with whatever investigation they want to conduct, and hope that eventually the legal system sorts this out. But that could take months or years, and in the meantime, Blackwood consolidates control over technology that could save thousands of lives in future disasters." Agent Torres interjected from the doorway. "Miss Vega, there's a third option. You could work with us. The FBI has been investigating Blackwood Industries for possible defense contract fraud. Your testimony could be crucial to building a case, while I sit in protective custody and watch him destroy everything I've built." Aurora shook her head. "Agent Torres, I appreciate the offer, but bureaucratic solutions won't work against someone who's spent years corrupting the bureaucracy." Eli found himself studying Aurora's face, looking for tells that might indicate whether she was trustworthy or simply a very convincing manipulator. What he saw was frustration, determination, and genuine concern for their safety, but also something else: hope. As if his simple act of kindness had given her reason to believe that fighting back was possible. Maya suddenly stood up and walked to Aurora, looking up at her with the serious expression she used when making important decisions. "Miss Aurora, do you promise not to let the bad men hurt Daddy?" "I promise, Maya." "And do you promise that your flying machines are really for helping people?" "I promise that too." Maya considered this for a moment, then turned to her father. "Daddy, I think we should help her. Mama always said we should help people when they're in trouble." Eli felt the weight of decision settling on his shoulders. His instinct was to protect Maya by maintaining their quiet, predictable life. But that life was already gone, destroyed the moment he'd given his jacket to a stranger. The question now was whether to trust that stranger or hope the chaos would simply disappear if he wished hard enough. He looked at Aurora, still wearing his work jacket, still carrying the beacon that had turned his world upside down. "If we help you, what exactly would that involve?" Aurora's answer would determine not just their immediate safety, but the direction of their lives for months to come. And despite having known her for less than an hour, Eli found himself hoping she would give him a reason to say yes to the most dangerous and important decision he'd ever been asked to make. Aurora spread a set of engineering drawings across Eli's coffee table with the reverence of someone unveiling sacred artifacts. The papers were covered with technical specifications that made Eli's mechanical mind come alive. Detailed schematics for propulsion systems, rotor configurations, and lift mechanisms that were unlike anything he'd seen in conventional aircraft design. "This is the humanitarian rapid response platform," Aurora explained, pointing to the central schematic. "We call it the Angel for short. It can carry a full medical team and equipment into disaster zones that conventional helicopters can't reach, areas with damaged infrastructure, unstable weather, or limited landing space." Eli studied the drawings with growing fascination. The design was brilliant in its simplicity, solving complex aerodynamic problems with elegant engineering solutions. This rotor system is designed to minimize downwash turbulence while maximizing lift efficiency. "Exactly," Aurora said, her eyes lighting up with the enthusiasm of someone discussing their life's work. "You understand the engineering principles better than most of my former board members ever did." Maya leaned over the drawings, her finger tracing the outline of the aircraft. "It looks like the flying house I drew last week, but more real." "That's because great minds think alike," Aurora told her with a smile. "Some of the best innovations come from people who imagine what's possible before they learn what's supposedly impossible." Agent Torres, who had been monitoring the situation from the doorway, stepped closer to examine the schematics. "Ms. Vega, these designs are classified as proprietary technology by your former company. Sharing them could violate federal intellectual property laws." "These aren't Blackwood's designs," Aurora replied firmly. "I developed these prototypes independently, using my personal resources and a small team of engineers who work exclusively for me. Blackwood doesn't even know they exist." She pulled out her tablet and showed them satellite images of a facility hidden in the coastal mountains north of San Francisco. "This is where we've been building and testing the prototypes. It's completely off the books, purchased through shell companies and staffed by people I trust absolutely." Eli examined the satellite images with a mechanic's eye for detail. The facility appeared to be a converted private airfield with several large hangars and what looked like a sophisticated testing range. "How many aircraft have you built?" "3 functional prototypes, each designed for different mission profiles. One optimized for speed and range, one for maximum payload capacity, and one for operations in extreme weather conditions." Aurora's pride in her work was evident. "We were preparing for field trials when Blackwood staged his coup." Maya tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, are we going to see the real flying machines?" Before Eli could answer, commotion erupted outside. Through the window, they could see Marcus Webb, the man Aurora had identified as Blackwood's security chief, moving through the crowd with purposeful determination. He was accompanied by 2 other men who moved with the controlled aggression of former military personnel. "We need to leave. Now," Aurora said, her voice sharp with urgency. "Webb doesn't make social visits." Agent Torres spoke rapidly into her earpiece, coordinating with her team. "Ms. Vega, federal custody is looking more attractive by the minute. We can guarantee your safety and Mr. Navarro's." "Can you guarantee it for months, years?" Aurora countered. "Because that's how long it will take to untangle this legally while Blackwood destroys everything I've worked for." Eli found himself caught between competing urgencies, the immediate need to protect Maya and the growing realization that Aurora's fight was bigger than personal revenge. The technology she'd described could save lives in disasters, deliver aid to places where conventional aircraft couldn't operate. It was engineering with a humanitarian purpose that resonated with his own values. "How do we get out of here without being followed?" he asked. Aurora smiled grimly. "The same way I've been evading Blackwood's people for 3 days. We use the fact that they expect me to run like a corporate executive instead of thinking like an engineer." She moved to the window and studied the positioning of vehicles on the street. "Webb's people are watching the front and back of the house, but they're positioned to intercept someone trying to escape by car. They're not expecting someone to leave on foot through the Patel's backyard and circle around to the auto shop." "The auto shop?" Eli was confused. "Where you work. It's only 6 blocks from here, and it has vehicle access that Blackwood's people won't be monitoring yet. Plus, it's the last place they'd expect a billionaire to hide. Agent Torres looked skeptical. And then what? You can't stay hidden forever. We don't need forever, Aurora replied. We just need enough time to reach my facility and implement a plan that will expose Blackwood's real intentions. Maya, who had been listening with growing excitement, suddenly spoke up. Are we going on an adventure? Eli knelt beside his daughter, trying to find words that would be honest without being terrifying. Maya, some very powerful people are trying to hurt Miss Aurora, and they might try to hurt us too if we help her. It could be dangerous. Maya considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important decisions. But if we don't help her, the bad people win. That's right, Sunshine. Then we have to help her. That's what heroes do in stories. Eli looked at his 7-year-old daughter, amazed by her courage and clarity. Elena would have been proud of the person Maya was becoming, someone who chose to help others, even when it was scary. Okay, he said, standing and facing Aurora. But we do this my way. I know this town better than anyone, and I'm not putting Maya at risk for your corporate war. Aurora nodded with evident relief. What do you need from me? First, I need to know that your facility is as secure as you claim. Second, I need a guarantee that if this goes wrong, you'll make sure Maya gets to safety, even if it means sacrificing your mission. You have both, Aurora said without hesitation. Agent Torres stepped forward. Mr. Navarro, I strongly advise against this course of action. Federal protective custody is the safest option for your family. Eli appreciated the agent's concern, but he'd made his decision. Agent Torres, with respect, your protective custody can't protect us from corporate lawyers and corrupted judges. Sometimes you have to take a stand, even when it's not the safest choice. The plan they developed was surprisingly simple. Aurora would leave first, exiting through the Patel's backyard, while Eli and Maya created a distraction by appearing to pack for an extended stay with relatives. The assumption was that Webb's people would follow Aurora, leaving Eli and Maya free to slip away through the drainage easement behind Mrs. Rodriguez's house. Mrs. Rodriguez, bless her heart, agreed to help without asking too many questions. She'd lived through enough upheaval in her own life to recognize when good people needed assistance against powerful forces. She would tell anyone who asked that she was driving Eli and Maya to the bus station, while actually taking them to the auto shop through a circuitous route designed to avoid surveillance. Are you sure about this, Mijo? Mrs. Rodriguez asked as they prepared to leave. There are some very serious-looking people out there. I'm sure, Eli replied, though in truth he was terrified. Sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks. As they gathered the few essentials they could carry, Maya insisted on bringing her drawing journal and her stuffed elephant. For luck, she explained, and maybe I can draw the real flying machines when we see them. Aurora, preparing to leave through the back door, paused to address Maya one final time. Maya, I want you to know that you and your father are the bravest people I've ever met. What you're doing today will help save lives. Will I get to fly in one of your airplanes? Maya asked. Aurora grinned. If your father says it's okay, absolutely. Eli felt a flutter of anxiety mixed with excitement. 24 hours ago, his biggest worry had been whether Maya's school shoes would last another month. Now he was about to embark on what could only be described as a real-life adventure, complete with corporate villains, advanced technology, and the possibility of actually making a difference in the world. But as he watched Aurora slip out the back door and disappear into the maze of backyards that connected his neighborhood, Eli realized that his decision wasn't really about adventure or technology. It was about the kind of person he wanted to be, the kind of example he wanted to set for Maya, and the belief that sometimes ordinary people have to do extraordinary things simply because it's right. The helicopter rotors still thrummed overhead, and Marcus Webb's security team still patrolled his street. But for the first time since the chaos began, Eli felt like he had some control over his family's destiny. They were no longer just victims of circumstance. They were active participants in something that mattered. 20 minutes later, as Mrs. Rodriguez's ancient Honda Civic puttered through Millhaven's back streets toward the auto shop. Maya pressed her face to the window and watched their quiet town scroll past. "Daddy," she said thoughtfully, "do you think we're going to change the world?" Eli considered the question seriously. "I don't know, Sunshine, but I think we're about to find out what we're really capable of." The auto shop felt different when approached as a refuge rather than a workplace. Frank had agreed to let them use the facility as a temporary meeting point, though his weathered face showed clear concern about the implications of harboring fugitives from corporate warfare. "Eli, you sure you know what you're getting into?" Frank asked as they settled into the small break room. "I've been in business for 15 years, and I've never seen anything like what's happening on your street." "Honestly, Frank, I have no idea what I'm getting into," Eli admitted. "But I know what's right, and helping someone who's been robbed doesn't seem like a difficult moral calculation." Aurora reached across the table and took Eli's hand, a gesture that was both intimate and desperate. "There's something else you need to know, something personal." Eli felt the calluses on her fingers, evidence that despite her billionaire status, she still worked with her hands. It reminded him of Elena, who had always maintained that you could judge a person's character by their willingness to do physical work. "My daughter would have been Maya's age," Aurora said quietly. "Sarah. She died in a hospital fire in Guatemala when she was 6. The hospital was in a remote mountain region, and it took rescue helicopters 47 minutes to reach them because of the terrain and weather conditions. The weight of her loss settled over the room like a physical presence. Maya, with the intuitive empathy of childhood, moved closer to Aurora's chair. "My angel prototypes can reach locations like that hospital in under 15 minutes, carrying a full medical team and firefighting equipment," Aurora continued. "Sarah's death taught me that engineering isn't just about solving technical problems, it's about solving human problems. Every minute we shave off response time could save someone else's child." Eli understood now why Aurora's fight against Blackwood was so personal, why she was willing to risk everything rather than accept defeat. This wasn't about corporate power or technological patents, it was about honoring the memory of a lost daughter by ensuring other children wouldn't suffer the same fate. "How long ago?" he asked. 3 years. Sarah's death is what drove me to develop the humanitarian applications for my aircraft technology. Blackwood supported the project initially, but only because he saw the military potential. When I refused to prioritize weapons development, he started planning the coup. Elena's wedding ring felt heavy on Eli's finger as he processed Aurora's story. Loss had shaped both their lives, but where his grief had made him cautious and protective, hers had fueled a determination to fight for something larger than personal safety. "Miss Aurora," Maya said softly, "I'm sorry about your little girl." Aurora's composure cracked slightly, tears threatening at the corners of her eyes. "Thank you, Maya. Sarah would have liked you very much. She loved to draw, just like you do." Frank, who had been listening from the doorway with the respectful silence of someone who understood parental loss, cleared his throat gently. "Aurora, what exactly do you need from us to make this right?" Aurora composed herself and pulled up a new set of schematics on her tablet. "My facility has 3 Angel prototypes, but they're not quite ready for operational deployment. Each aircraft needs specific modifications that require someone with exceptional mechanical skills and the ability to think creatively under pressure." She turned the tablet toward Eli, showing detailed technical specifications for propulsion systems that were more advanced than anything he'd encountered in conventional aircraft maintenance. "Eli, your work on automotive engines has given you exactly the kind of problem-solving experience I need. These aircraft engines operate on similar principles, but with tolerances and performance requirements that push conventional engineering to its limits." Eli studied the schematics with growing excitement. The engineering challenges were unlike anything he'd faced, but the fundamental principles were familiar. More importantly, he could see ways to improve the design small modifications that could increase efficiency and reliability. "You want me to help you finish building these aircraft?" "I want you to help me perfect them," Aurora corrected. "The prototypes are functional, but they need the kind of intuitive mechanical understanding that can't be taught in engineering school. They need someone who can feel what an engine needs, not just calculate it. Maya looked between her father and Aurora with growing excitement. "Daddy, you're going to build flying machines?" "Maybe, sunshine, but it would mean leaving Millhaven for a while. Are you okay with that?" Maya considered this question with the seriousness she brought to all major life decisions. "Will there be other kids at the flying machine place?" Aurora smiled. "Actually, yes. My facility is also home to several families. My lead engineer has twin boys who are 8, and my test pilot has a daughter who's 9. They're all children of people who believe that technology should be used to help people, not hurt them." The prospect of Maya having playmates who shared her enthusiasm for aviation and engineering was appealing, but Eli still had practical concerns. "What about schools?" "Maya's education is my top priority. The facility has a small school staffed by teachers who specialize in gifted children with interests in science and technology," Aurora explained. "Maya would be challenged academically, while also having access to real engineering projects that could nurture her obvious talents." Frank, who had been following the conversation with growing amazement, shook his head in disbelief. "Eli, 24 hours ago, you were worried about making rent. Now you're being offered a job building experimental aircraft for a billionaire philanthropist." "Sometimes life changes faster than we can process it," Eli replied, though he was still struggling to fully comprehend the magnitude of what Aurora was proposing. Aurora's tablet chimed with an alert, and her expression became urgent as she checked the display. "Blackwood's people are expanding their search. They've got teams checking every business within a 2-mile radius of your house. We need to make a decision soon." Eli looked around the auto shop that had been his professional home for 3 years. The familiar tools, the comfortable routine, the predictable challenges of fixing other people's broken machines. It was a good life, a safe life, but was it the life that would make the best use of his talents? "If I say yes," he said slowly, "what happens to Frank, to the auto shop, to our life here in Millhaven?" Aurora had clearly anticipated this question. "Frank, how would you feel about becoming the West Coast service center for a new aerospace company? Same work you're doing now, but with better equipment and customers who actually pay their bills on time." Frank's eyebrows rose toward his hairline. "You're offering to buy the shop?" "I'm offering to make it part of something bigger while keeping everything you love about it," Aurora clarified. "Eli's right to be concerned about the people who depend on him. Real change has to benefit everyone, not just the people at the top." The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted their conversation. Through the shop's windows, they could see black SUVs pulling into the parking lot of the hardware store across the street. Blackwood's security team was getting closer. "Decision time," Aurora said, standing and gathering her equipment. "I can get us to my facility safely, but we need to leave now." Eli looked at Maya, who was watching the proceedings with the bright-eyed excitement of someone embarking on the adventure of a lifetime. He thought about Elena, who had always encouraged him to take risks in service of something meaningful. He thought about Aurora's lost daughter and the children who might be saved by technology that prioritized humanitarian applications over military profits. "Frank," he said, "can you handle things here for a while?" Frank grinned and pulled out his phone. "Son, I've been waiting 15 years for an excuse to retire, but this sounds like more fun than retirement." Aurora moved toward the shop's back exit, which opened onto a loading dock that connected to the industrial district's network of service roads. "There's a supply truck waiting 2 blocks from here. The driver thinks he's delivering parts to a private airfield. He's not wrong, exactly." As they prepared to leave the auto shop behind, Eli felt the weight of Elena's wedding ring on his finger and made a decision that surprised him. He slipped the ring off and handed it to Frank. "Keep this safe for me. When we come back, I'll need you to return it so I can give it to Maya when she's old enough." Frank accepted the ring with the gravity of someone being entrusted with something sacred. "You sure about this, Eli?" "No," Eli admitted, "but I'm sure about helping Aurora, and I'm sure about giving Maya a chance to see what she's really capable of." Aurora paused at the door and looked back at the auto shop with something approaching reverence. This is where it really started, isn't it? Not with the beacon or the helicopters, but with a man who was willing to help a stranger in need. Actually, Maya said thoughtfully, I think it started when Mama taught Daddy that the best way to honor people you love is to help people you don't know yet. As they stepped into the supply truck that would carry them toward an uncertain but hopeful future, Eli realized that his 7-year-old daughter had just articulated the moral principle that was about to reshape all their lives. Arrived 30 minutes later, having successfully evaded Blackwood's surveillance team by taking a route through the industrial district that only someone familiar with Millhaven's geography could have navigated. She looked relieved but exhausted, the strain of 3 days on the run showing in her posture and expression. Maya immediately ran to Aurora and hugged her around the waist. You made it. I was worried the bad men caught you. It takes more than corporate thugs to catch an aerospace engineer, Aurora said with a tired smile. Besides, I had an excellent escape route planned by your father. She settled into one of the mismatched chairs that furnished the break room and pulled out her tablet, which displayed a real-time map showing various colored dots moving around Millhaven. Blackwood's people are still concentrated around your house, but they're starting to expand their search pattern. We probably have an hour before they think to check the auto shop. Eli studied the tracking display with growing unease. How are you monitoring their movements? Emergency protocols, Aurora explained. When I activated the extraction beacon, it also initiated surveillance countermeasures that my security team developed. We can track anyone using standard corporate communication frequencies within a 15-mile radius. Frank, who had been listening from the doorway, whistled softly. Lady, you're either the most prepared, paranoid person I've ever met, or you really are worth $12 billion. Both, Aurora replied with a weary laugh. Paranoia is a survival skill when you're trying to revolutionize an industry that makes enormous profits from inefficiency. She pulled up a new set of files on her tablet, these showing financial documents and corporate communications. Before I explain where we're going next, you need to understand what Blackwood really wants. It's not just about stealing my company, it's about preventing my technology from reaching the humanitarian market. The documents she showed them painted a disturbing picture. Blackwood Industries had spent the past 2 years acquiring contracts with military organizations and private security firms, all focused on adapting Aurora's aircraft designs for combat and surveillance applications. My Angel prototypes were designed to save lives in disaster zones, Aurora said, her voice heavy with anger and disappointment. Blackwood wants to turn them into weapons platforms and surveillance drones. He's already signed preliminary contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Eli examined the contract summaries with growing disgust. The same technology that could deliver medical supplies to earthquake victims was being repurposed to deliver missiles to designated targets. The elegant engineering that could evacuate flood victims was being corrupted into systems for tracking and intimidating civilian populations. Can't the government stop this? Maya asked, following the conversation with the moral clarity that children brought to complex situations. The government doesn't know it's happening, Aurora explained gently. Blackwood has convinced them that I'm unstable and that he's the responsible steward of the technology. By the time anyone realizes what's really going on, he'll have enough military contracts to make changing course financially impossible. Aurora. The drive to Aurora's facility took them through coastal mountains that Maya had never seen before, despite living her entire life less than an hour away. Hidden valleys opened between forested ridges, and the Pacific Ocean appeared and disappeared through gaps in the trees like glimpses of another world. Aurora's facility was accessed through an unmarked road that looked like it led to a private residence. Only when they passed through a sophisticated security checkpoint, disguised as a cattle guard, did the true nature of their destination become apparent. The hidden workshop keys that Aurora had mentioned were actually electronic passes that unlocked a series of barriers camouflaged to look like natural landscape features. "Welcome to Angel Base," Aurora said, as they crested a hill and the facility came into view. Maya pressed her face to the truck's window and gasped. 3 enormous hangars were built into the mountainside, their entrances large enough to accommodate aircraft, but designed to blend seamlessly with the surrounding terrain. Between the hangars, a network of workshops and testing facilities sprawled across the valley floor, connected by paths that followed the natural contours of the landscape. But what took Eli's breath away were the aircraft themselves. 3 sleek, futuristic machines sat on the tarmac outside the hangars, each one embodying the elegant engineering principles he'd seen in Aurora's sketches, but realized now in full-scale, functional reality. They looked like they had emerged from Maya's most ambitious drawings aircraft that seemed to defy conventional assumptions about how flying machines should look and function. "Daddy, they're beautiful," Maya whispered, and Eli had to agree. The angels were beautiful in the way that truly functional engineering always weighs very line and surface, serving a purpose, every component optimized for both performance and reliability. Aurora's team was waiting to greet them, and Eli was surprised by the diversity of ages and backgrounds represented. Dr. Sarah Chen, the lead engineer, was younger than Aurora but carried herself with the confidence of someone who had solved problems that had stumped others. Marcus Rivera, the test pilot, had the calm demeanor of someone who regularly trusted his life to experimental technology. And there were other machinists, software developers, logistics, coordinatorial, united by their commitment to humanitarian applications of advanced technology. But what impressed Eli most was the presence of families. Children ran between the workshops, their laughter mixing with the sounds of precision manufacturing. Spouses worked alongside the primary engineers, creating an atmosphere that felt more like a dedicated community than a traditional aerospace facility. "This is what Blackwood could never understand," Aurora explained as they toured the main workshop. "Real innovation comes from people who believe in something bigger than profit margins. Everyone here has a personal stake in making this technology serve humanitarian purposes." Maya was immediately adopted by the other children, who were eager to show off their knowledge of aircraft systems and engineering principles. Within minutes, she was being given a tour of the prototype cockpits by 9-year-old Rebecca Rivera, who spoke about flight controls with the casual expertise of someone who had grown up around experimental aircraft. Eli found himself in the main engineering bay, surrounded by tools and equipment that represented the cutting edge of aerospace manufacturing. But it was the problems Aurora showed him that really captured his attention, challenges involving engine efficiency, rotor balance, and system integration that required exactly the kind of intuitive mechanical understanding he'd developed through years of automotive repair. "The Angel, one has a vibration issue at certain RPMs that we can't eliminate through software," Dr. Chen explained, showing him diagnostic data that revealed a complex harmonic pattern. "Mathematically, everything should work perfectly, but the real-world performance suggests there's something we're missing." Eli studied the data for several minutes, then asked to see the actual engine. What he found was a masterpiece of engineering that operated on principles he understood, but at a level of precision that challenged every assumption he'd made about mechanical systems. "The problem isn't in your calculations," he said after examining the rotor assembly. "It's in the manufacturing tolerances. These components are built to specifications that assume perfect uniformity, but no manufacturing process is truly perfect. You need to account for tiny variations that accumulate into larger harmonic distortions." Dr. Chen looked skeptical until Eli demonstrated by making a minute adjustment to the rotor balancier, modification so small it could barely be measured, but which eliminated the vibration entirely. "How did you know to make that specific adjustment?" she asked. "Experience," Eli replied. "I've spent years listening to engines tell me what they need. This one was saying the same thing as a car engine, with a slightly bent crankshaft. The math says it should work, but the physics says it needs help." Aurora, who had been watching the interaction with growing excitement, pulled Eli aside for a private conversation. "Dr. Chen has a PhD in aerospace engineering from MIT. You just solved a problem that's been troubling her for weeks, using intuition and experience she can't replicate. She's brilliant, Eli said quickly. I just have a different kind of background. Exactly, and that's what makes this partnership so powerful. Aurora gestured toward the workshop, where Maya was now helping Rebecca explain aircraft stability principles to the younger children. Maya understands engineering intuitively because she hasn't learned what's supposedly impossible yet. You understand it practically because you've spent years making impossible things work anyway. That evening, the entire community gathered for dinner in a common area that felt more like a family reunion than a corporate meeting. Children sat with adults, technical discussions mixed with ordinary conversation, and Eli began to understand what Aurora meant about creating a different kind of organization. Traditional aerospace companies treat engineers like replaceable components, Aurora explained over dessert. But real innovation comes from communities where people care about each other as much as they care about the work. When Sarah died, I realized that the technology we develop has to serve human communities, not corporate hierarchies. Maya, who had been quiet during dinner while processing everything she'd seen, suddenly spoke up. Miss Aurora, when your airplanes help people, do you tell them about Sarah? Aurora's composure wavered for a moment. No, Maya. Why do you ask? Because I think Sarah would want people to know that she helped save them, even though she's not here anymore. Like how Mama helps Daddy be a good father even though she's in heaven. The profound simplicity of Maya's observation silenced the entire table. Eli felt tears threatening as he realized that his daughter had articulated something about grief and purpose that adults struggled to express. Maya, you're absolutely right, Aurora said finally. From now on, every Angel aircraft will carry a small plaque honoring Sarah and all the children who inspire us to build technology that protects rather than destroys. Later, as Maya settled into the guest quarters they'd been assigned, she pulled out her drawing journal and began sketching the aircraft she'd seen that day. But her drawings were different, now more detailed, more technically accurate, but also more purposeful. These weren't just flying machines in her imagination anymore. They were tools that could help people in real-world situations. Daddy, she said as Eli tucked her into bed. Are we going to stay here? Do you want to stay here? Maya considered the question with her characteristic seriousness. I miss home, and I miss Mrs. Rodriguez, and I miss our kitchen table. But I like that everyone here is trying to help people with their flying machines. And I like that Rebecca knows how airplanes work almost as much as I do. Almost as much? Eli asked with amusement. Well, I have better ideas about what colors they should be, Maya replied with dignity. As Eli settled into his own quarters that night, he reflected on the day's revelations. Aurora's facility wasn't just a place where advanced technology was developed. It was a community built around the principle that engineering should serve humanitarian purposes. The work was challenging, the people were brilliant, and the mission was something he could believe in completely. But he also understood that they were living in a temporary sanctuary. Blackwood's resources and determination meant that eventually they would have to confront the forces trying to corrupt Aurora's technology. The question was whether they could perfect the Angel prototypes and build enough support for their humanitarian mission before Blackwood's corporate warfare succeeded in destroying everything they were trying to accomplish. Outside his window, the 3 Angel aircraft sat silhouetted against the star-filled sky, ready to be transformed from experimental prototypes into operational vehicles that could save lives in disaster zones around the world. Tomorrow, Eli would begin the most challenging and meaningful work of his career, helping to perfect technology that honored the memory of lost children by protecting the children of the future. For the first time since Elena's death, Eli fell asleep, feeling like his life was moving toward something larger than mere survival toward purpose, community, and the possibility that ordinary people could create extraordinary change when they worked together in service of something they believed in completely. 3 weeks into their residency at Angel Base, Eli had settled into a routine that challenged every assumption he'd made about his own capabilities. Working alongside Dr. Chen and the engineering team, he'd helped solve mechanical problems that had puzzled experts for months. The Angel prototypes were performing better than their original specifications, and Maya had become an unofficial mascot whose mechanical insights occasionally surprised the adult engineers. But it was Aurora's growing trust that both pleased and concerned him. She'd begun sharing technical details and strategic plans that went far beyond what he needed to know for his mechanical work. More troubling, she'd started discussing military applications for the Angel technology with an enthusiasm that seemed inconsistent with her humanitarian mission. The discovery that would change everything came by accident. Maya, exploring the facility with her new friend Rebecca, had wandered into a restricted section of the main hangar while the adults were focused on engine testing. What she found there were documents that had been hastily concealed beneath a top corporate communications and technical specifications that painted a very different picture of Aurora's true intentions. "Daddy," Maya said that evening, her voice small and worried, "I think Miss Aurora might be lying about something." Eli looked up from the engine component he'd been modifying, noting the unusual seriousness in his daughter's expression. "What do you mean, Sunshine?" Maya pulled out her drawing journal and showed him a sketch she'd made that afternoon, not of aircraft, but of documents she'd seen in the restricted area. Her 7-year-old's memory for visual details had captured enough information to make Eli's blood run cold. The sketch showed contract headers from defense contractors, technical specifications for weapons systems, and most damaging of all, a partial organizational chart that showed Aurora's humanitarian team as just one division of a much larger military development program. "Maya, where exactly did you see these papers?" "In the big hangar, behind the scary airplane that doesn't look like the pretty ones." Eli felt a chill of recognition. There was indeed a fourth aircraft in the main hangar, one that Aurora had dismissed as an early prototype and discouraged him from examining. Unlike the elegant Angels, this aircraft had an aggressive appearance and mounting points that could accommodate weapons systems. That night, after Maya was asleep, Eli made a decision that felt like both betrayal and necessity. Using his security access to the workshop areas, he entered the restricted section and found the documents Maya had sketched. What he discovered was worse than he'd feared. The forged documents, though authentically produced by Aurora's organization, revealed that the humanitarian Angel program was actually a cover for developing next-generation military aircraft. The contracts were real, the military specifications were detailed, and Aurora's passionate speeches about saving lives were apparently camouflage for a program designed to make warfare more efficient. But the most damaging revelation was a communication thread between Aurora and Richard Blackwood that suggested their corporate battle was entirely fabricated. According to these documents, Blackwood's hostile takeover was actually a planned maneuver designed to provide cover for Aurora's transition from civilian to military applications. The FBI investigation, the media attention, even Eli's involvement of it appeared to be elaborate theater designed to conceal the true nature of the Angel technology. Eli photographed the most damaging documents with his phone, his hands shaking with anger and disbelief. Aurora hadn't just lied to him about her intentions, she'd used his genuine desire to help people as a cover for developing weapons that could be used against civilian populations. Worse, she'd involved Maya in the deception, using his daughter's enthusiasm for aviation as validation for a program that perverted everything they claimed to believe in. The sound of footsteps in the corridor alerted him that someone was approaching. Eli quickly concealed the documents and slipped out of the restricted area, but not before Aurora herself appeared at the entrance to the main hangar. "Eli, what are you doing here so late?" "Couldn't sleep," he replied, hoping his voice sounded casual. "Thought I'd check on the rotor balance we adjusted today." Aurora studied his face with the calculating expression of someone who had built a career on reading people's motivations. "Everything okay? You seem tense." "Just tired. It's been a big adjustment, all of this." "Yes, it has," Aurora agreed, but her tone suggested she suspected more than fatigue was troubling him. "Eli, I hope you know how much your work here means to me, to all of us." You're helping create technology that will save countless lives." The irony of her words was almost unbearable, but Eli managed to nod and excuse himself to return to his quarters. There, he lay awake until dawn, wrestling with the implications of what he'd discovered and trying to decide how to protect Maya from the consequences of his naive trust in Aurora's claims. By morning, he'd reached a decision that terrified him but seemed unavoidable. He had to get Maya away from Angel Base immediately before Aurora realized he'd discovered the truth about her military program. But he also had to find a way to expose the deception without putting other innocent people at risk. The plan he developed was necessarily simple. During the morning testing session, he would create a minor but attention-getting mechanical problem with one of the Angel prototypes, something that would require Aurora and the engineering team to focus on diagnosis and repair. While they were distracted, he would take Maya and attempt to reach the nearest town, where he could contact federal authorities who weren't compromised by Aurora's elaborate deception. But Maya, with the perceptiveness that had gotten them into this situation, immediately sensed his changed mood at breakfast. "Daddy, are we leaving today?" she asked quietly, while the other children chatted about their plans for the day. "How did you know?" "Because you have the same look you had when Mama got really sick and you had to make hard decisions." Maya's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes showed the strain of processing adult complexities that she shouldn't have to understand. Eli realized that he couldn't protect Maya from the truth without also respecting her intelligence and involving her in decisions that affected her safety. "Maya, I think Miss Aurora hasn't been honest with us about what her airplanes are really for. We might need to leave here quickly." Maya nodded solemnly. "The papers I saw yesterday, they were about using the flying machines to hurt people instead of helping them, weren't they?" "I think so, Sunshine. And that means we can't stay here anymore, even though we like the people and the work." "What about Rebecca and her family? What about Dr. Chen and all the nice people who really do want to help?" It was the question that had kept Eli awake all night. How many of Aurora's team members were willing participants in the deception, and how many were genuine believers who had been manipulated just as thoroughly as he had been? "I don't know," he admitted. "But the first thing we have to do is get somewhere safe, where we can figure out how to help the good people without helping the bad plan." Maya considered this while finishing her cereal, then looked up at him with an expression of determined resolve that reminded him powerfully of Elena. "Okay, Daddy, but I want to say goodbye to Rebecca first. And I want to take my drawings of the real airplanes so people will know what the good ones are supposed to look like." As they prepared for what might be their most dangerous morning since this adventure began, Eli realized that Aurora's greatest mistake hadn't been trusting him with access to her facility. It had been underestimating the moral clarity of a 7-year-old who understood the difference between helping people and hurting them, regardless of how sophisticated the technology involved might be. The question now was whether they could escape Angel Base before Aurora realized that her carefully constructed deception had been penetrated by the same childlike honesty that had inspired Eli to give his jacket to a stranger less than a month ago. The morning testing session provided the perfect cover for Eli's planned escape. While Aurora and Dr. Chen focused on the engine diagnostics he'd deliberately complicated, Eli and Maya slipped away from the main workshop area. But as they approached the facility's perimeter, Maya suddenly stopped walking and pulled her lucky compass from her pocket, the small brass instrument that had been Elena's last gift to their daughter. "Daddy, wait," Maya said, studying the compass with unusual intensity. "The needle isn't pointing north anymore." Eli examined the compass and realized she was right. Instead of indicating magnetic north, the needle was pointing toward the restricted hangar where the 4th aircraft was stored. "That's strange, Sunshine. Compasses don't usually behave that way unless there's strong electromagnetic interference." The implications hit him like a physical blow. The 4th aircraft wasn't just a weapons platform, it was generating electromagnetic signatures that could interfere with navigation equipment, which meant Aurora's technology was even more dangerous than the documents had suggested. "Maya, we need to go back and warn the others. If that aircraft can disrupt navigation systems, it could cause civilian aircraft to crash. But as they turned toward the main facility, they found their path blocked by Marcus Rivera, the test pilot whose calm demeanor had always made Eli feel safe. Today, however, Marcus looked anything but calm. "Eli, Aurora wants to see you in the main hangar, both of you." The tone made it clear this wasn't a request. Eli felt Maya's hand slip into his as they walked back toward the facility, her lucky compass still pointing toward whatever electromagnetic anomaly was hidden in the restricted area. Aurora was waiting for them beside the fourth aircraft, which had been uncovered to reveal its true nature. Unlike the elegant humanitarian angels, this machine looked like it had been designed for a single purpose, projecting power through intimidation and force. Weapons, mounting points, stealth coating, and sensor arrays that could track targets from impossible distances. "Eli, I'm disappointed," Aurora said, her voice carrying none of the warmth that had characterized their previous interactions. "I really hoped you would understand the bigger picture without needing to see behind the curtain." "The bigger picture?" Eli's anger flared despite his fear. "You lied to me about everything. You used my daughter's enthusiasm to validate a weapons program. I used your exceptional mechanical skills to perfect technology that will prevent conflicts instead of escalating them." Aurora corrected. "Do you have any idea how many lives could be saved if we had aircraft capable of ending wars quickly instead of prolonging them?" Maya stepped forward, her 7-year-old voice cutting through the adult complexities with characteristic clarity. "Miss Aurora, you promised your flying machines were for helping people. Helping means making people feel better, not making them more scared." Aurora knelt beside Maya, her expression genuinely pained. "Maya, sometimes adults have to make difficult choices about how to help people. Sometimes preventing bigger hurts requires creating smaller ones." "That's what the bad people always say in stories," Maya replied with devastating logic. "The good people find ways to help without hurting." Dr. Chen appeared at the entrance to the hangar, her face showing the strain of someone whose professional world had just collapsed. "Aurora, the engine modifications Eli made yesterday, they're not just improving performance, they're enabling the aircraft to generate electromagnetic pulses that could disable civilian infrastructure." Eli felt sick as the full scope of Aurora's deception became clear. His mechanical improvements, made with the intention of helping humanitarian missions, had actually enhanced the weapons capabilities of aircraft designed for military dominance. "You used my skills to make your weapons more effective," he said, his voice barely controlled. "I used your skills to create aircraft that can end conflicts before they escalate into larger casualties." Aurora insisted. "Eli, the technology you've helped perfect could prevent the next Syria, the next Yemen, the next situation where humanitarian disasters are compounded by prolonged warfare, by making everyone too afraid to fight back, by making resistance pointless, which saves lives on all sides." The philosophical debate was interrupted by alarms throughout the facility. Through the hangar's windows, they could see helicopters approaching not the media circus from Millhaven, but military aircraft with serious intentions. "Agent Torres," Aurora said into her phone, "I told you I needed more time." The response was apparently not what she wanted to hear, because her expression darkened further. "No, that's not acceptable. We had an agreement." Eli realized with growing horror that even the FBI's involvement had been orchestrated by Aurora. The federal investigation, the protective custody offers, even Agent Torres's apparent concern for their safety, all of it, had been theater designed to provide cover for Aurora's real agenda. "Maya," he whispered, "when I say run, head for the tunnel entrance we saw yesterday. Rebecca showed you where it leads, right?" Maya nodded, her hand tightening around her compass. "It goes to the old mine shaft that comes out near the road." The helicopter landing outside provided enough distraction for Eli to grab Maya's hand and sprint toward the tunnel entrance, but they'd only made it halfway across the hangar when Aurora's voice stopped them. "Eli, if you leave now, you'll never know whether the technology you helped perfect saves lives or costs them." You'll spend the rest of your life wondering whether you walked away from the chance to prevent future tragedies like the one that took Sarah. The emotional manipulation was expertly crafted, appealing to his desire to honor Elena's memory by helping others. But Maya's compass was still pointing toward the electromagnetic anomaly, reminding him that Aurora's version of helping involved making people afraid rather than making them safe. "Miss Aurora," Maya called back, "if your flying machines really helped people, you wouldn't need to trick people into building them." Dr. Chen, who had been listening to the exchange with growing distress, suddenly spoke up. "Aurora, she's right. If we have to lie about what we're building, then what we're building is wrong. Sarah, you don't understand the complexities. I understand that you've been using our humanitarian mission as cover for developing weapons." Dr. Chen interrupted. "I understand that you've manipulated good people into participating in exactly the kind of program we thought we were trying to prevent." The sound of boots on concrete announced the arrival of Aurora's security team, but they weren't alone. Agent Torres appeared in the hangar entrance, flanked by federal marshals whose expressions suggested they weren't here for a friendly visit. "Aurora Vega, you're under arrest for violation of federal weapons development regulations and conspiracy to defraud the Department of Defense," Agent Torres announced. Aurora's carefully constructed facade finally cracked completely. "Agent Torres, you can't do this. The technology we've developed here could revolutionize conflict prevention. The technology you've developed here violates 17 different international treaties," Agent Torres replied. "And you've been developing it under false pretenses, using manipulated investors and deceived employees." As federal agents secured the facility and began documenting Aurora's illegal weapons program, Eli held Maya close and tried to process the magnitude of their escape from a situation that could have made them unwilling accomplices in exactly the kind of military program they'd thought they were working to prevent. "Daddy," Maya said quietly, "are we in trouble for helping the bad people?" "No, sunshine. We're not in trouble because we helped when we thought we were doing good, and we stopped helping when we learned we were being tricked." Agent Torres approached them with an expression that mixed relief and concern. "Mr. Navarro, we're going to need your testimony about the technical modifications you made to Aurora's aircraft. But I want you to know that your cooperation will be noted in all our reports." As they prepared to leave Angel Base for the second time in a month, Eli realized that Maya's compass had saved them in more ways than one. Elena's gift had pointed them toward the truth about Aurora's electromagnetic weapons, but more importantly, it had reminded them that true direction comes from moral clarity rather than sophisticated technology. The real battle was just beginning the fight to ensure that the humanitarian applications of Aurora's aircraft designs could be developed by people who genuinely intended to help rather than intimidate. But for the first time since giving his jacket to a stranger, Eli felt confident that they were finally moving in the right direction. The chaos that erupted when Aurora's deception was exposed revealed the true scope of her manipulation. As federal agents secured the facility, it became clear that not everyone at Angel Base had been deceived about the program's real purposes. Several of Aurora's senior staff members were themselves federal agents, part of a long-term investigation into illegal weapons development disguised as humanitarian technology. But the most shocking revelation came when Dr. Chen approached Eli with tears in her eyes and a confession that changed everything he thought he understood about the situation. "Eli, I need to tell you something that Aurora doesn't know," Dr. Chen said, glancing around to ensure they weren't overheard. "The real Angel prototypes, the ones designed purely for humanitarian purposes, they're not here." Eli stared at her in confusion. "What do you mean?" 3 months ago, when I started suspecting Aurora's real intentions, I began building actual humanitarian aircraft in secret. The real Angels, the ones that could save lives without any weapons capability, they're hidden in a facility that Aurora never knew existed. Maya, who had been listening with growing excitement, tugged on Dr. Chen's sleeve. "You built the good flying machines anyway?" "Yes, Maya, because your father was right when he said that helping people shouldn't require hurting them." Dr. Chen pulled out a tablet showing schematics that were clearly related to Aurora's designs, but stripped of all military applications. These aircraft can do everything. Aurora promised deliver medical supplies, evacuate disaster victims, provide humanitarian aid, but they can't be weaponized. The prototype aircraft that Dr. Chen revealed became the center of a frantic escape plan as Aurora's security forces, realizing their program was collapsing, attempted to seize control of all the technology before federal agents could secure it. The real Angela, gleaming white aircraft that embodied everything Aurora had claimed to believe, insat in a hidden hangar that could only be accessed through the mine tunnels Maya had discovered. "Can you fly this?" Eli asked Marcus Rivera, who had revealed himself to be one of the federal agents monitoring Aurora's program. "I can," Marcus replied, "but we need to get it airborne before Aurora's people realize where the real prototypes are hidden." The race to reach the hidden Angel became a desperate chase through underground passages that Maya navigated with the confidence of someone who had spent weeks exploring every corner of the facility. Her compass, still affected by the electromagnetic interference from Aurora's weapons platform, actually helped them find the right tunnel by pointing them away from the military aircraft. Behind them, they could hear Aurora shouting orders to her remaining loyal staff, demanding that they prevent the theft of her technology. But ahead of them lay the possibility of proving that humanitarian aircraft could exist without military applications, that technology could serve human needs without serving human fears. The real Angel prototype was everything Aurora had promised, and nothing she had actually built. Sleek but gentle in its design, powerful but quiet in its operation, it represented the kind of engineering that prioritized helping over intimidating. As they prepared for takeoff, Eli realized that this aircraft embodied everything he'd hoped to accomplish when he'd first agreed to help Aurora. "Where are we going?" Maya asked as Marcus powered up the Angel's systems. "To show the world what these aircraft can really do," Dr. Chen replied. "There's a disaster relief exercise happening in Southern California today, simulation of earthquake response. If we can demonstrate the Angel's humanitarian capabilities in front of international observers, we can prove that Aurora's weapons program was unnecessary." The takeoff from the hidden facility required flying through a narrow canyon that tested both Marcus's piloting skills and the Angel's maneuverability. But as they cleared the mountains and headed south, Eli felt a sense of purpose that had eluded him since Elena's death. They weren't just escaping from Aurora's deception, they were actively working to ensure that technology would serve humanitarian rather than military purposes. Maya pressed her face to the window and watched the California coastline scroll beneath them. "Daddy, are we finally going to help people the right way?" "Yes, sunshine. We're going to help people the right way." The disaster relief exercise in Southern California had drawn international observers, emergency response teams, and media representatives from around the world. It was designed to test coordinated responses to major earthquake scenarios, making it the perfect venue for demonstrating the Angel's true humanitarian capabilities. But as they approached the exercise area, Marcus received an urgent radio transmission that changed everything. "Angel prototype. This is Colonel Sarah Martinez, exercise coordinator. We have an actual emergency in progress. A 6.2 earthquake has struck the Salton Sea region. Are you equipped for real disaster response?" Dr. Chen and Marcus exchanged glances. The Angel prototype was fully functional, but it hadn't been tested in actual emergency conditions. Everything they'd built was about to be put to the ultimate test. "Colonel Martinez, this is Dr. Sarah Chen, aboard the Angel humanitarian aircraft. We're equipped for medical evacuation and supply delivery. What do you need?" "We have 60 people trapped in a remote resort area. The access roads are blocked by landslides, and our conventional helicopters can't land safely due to unstable terrain. Can your aircraft handle a precision landing in rough conditions?" Maya looked up at her father with eyes that reflected both excitement and concern. "Daddy, are we really going to save people?" "We're going to try, sunshine." The flight to the earthquake zone revealed the Angel's capabilities in ways that no simulation could have demonstrated. The aircraft's advanced navigation systems automatically compensated for ground instability. Its quiet engines allowed communication with people on the ground, and its efficient design meant they could carry both medical personnel and evacuation equipment simultaneously. But what truly proved the Angel's value was its ability to land in spaces that conventional aircraft couldn't access. The resort area where people were trapped was surrounded by unstable cliffs and debris fields that would have defeated traditional helicopters. The Angel's advanced rotors and computer-assisted landing systems allowed Marcus to set down safely in a parking lot barely larger than the aircraft itself. The evacuation that followed became a masterclass in humanitarian technology. Working with local emergency responders, they were able to transport injured victims to medical facilities, deliver essential supplies to people still trapped, and provide coordination support for the broader rescue effort. Maya, despite her age, proved invaluable as someone small enough to carry communication equipment through spaces that adults couldn't access. "Maya, can you get this radio to the people in the gift shop?" Dr. Chen asked, handing her a compact communication device. "They're trapped behind debris, but you might be able to crawl through that gap." Maya accepted the radio with the seriousness of someone who understood that lives depended on her actions. 10 minutes later, she emerged from the debris pile, followed by 3 adults and 2 children who had been trapped for 6 hours. "The little girl saved us." One of the rescued adults told the news crews that had arrived to document the rescue. "She crawled through spaces we couldn't fit through and brought us a radio so we could coordinate with the rescue teams." But it was the Angel's performance that truly captured international attention. Over the course of 8 hours, the prototype aircraft completed 17 rescue missions, transported 43 people to safety, and delivered medical supplies to remote areas that other aircraft couldn't reach. Every capability that Aurora had claimed for her humanitarian aircraft was demonstrated in real-world conditions, but without any of the military applications that had corrupted her original vision. As the rescue operation wound down, Colonel Martinez approached Eli with an expression of professional respect mixed with amazement. "Mr. Navarro, I understand you helped develop this aircraft's propulsion system. This is the most effective disaster response aircraft I've seen in 20 years of emergency management." "It's what the technology was always supposed to do," Eli replied, watching Maya help Dr. Chen check the Angel's systems after their long day of operations. "Help people when they need it most." The public broadcast recording that resulted from the day's rescue operations became the most compelling argument possible for humanitarian applications of advanced aircraft technology. News organizations around the world carried footage of the Angel delivering aid, evacuating victims, and proving that sophisticated engineering could serve human needs without serving military purposes. Aurora, watching the coverage from federal custody, realized that her elaborate deception had actually prevented her from building the very thing she claimed to want most: aircraft that could save lives in emergency situations. The real Angel prototype, developed by Dr. Chen and perfected by Eli's mechanical expertise, had accomplished in one day what Aurora's weapons program could never have achieved, demonstrating that technology serves humanity best when it's designed with genuine humanitarian intentions. Maya, exhausted but exhilarated by their day of real heroics, fell asleep on the flight home, with her drawing journal open to a new sketch not of imaginary flying machines, but of the real Angel aircraft, surrounded by the people they'd helped rescue. It was a drawing that captured everything her father had tried to teach her about the importance of helping others, everything Elena would have wanted their daughter to understand about using your abilities in service of something larger than yourself. As they flew back toward Northern California, Eli realized that the journey that had begun with giving his jacket to a stranger had led them to something far more significant than he could have imagined. They hadn't just escaped from Aurora's deception, they'd actively participated in proving that humanitarian technology could work exactly as intended when it was developed by people who genuinely wanted to help rather than control. The Angel prototype had passed its ultimate test, not in corporate boardrooms or military demonstrations, but in the real world, helping real people who needed assistance. And Maya had proven herself to be exactly the kind of person Elena would have been proud to raise, someone who understood that heroism wasn't about having special abilities, but about using whatever abilities you had to help others when they needed it most. 6 months after the earthquake rescue operation, Eli stood in the main hangar of what had formerly been Aurora's Angel base, now transformed into the headquarters of the Humanitarian Aviation Initiative. The federal government, impressed by the Angel prototype's performance during the Salton Sea earthquake, had provided funding and oversight for a legitimate program developing disaster response aircraft. Maya ran between the workstations with Rebecca Rivera and the other children who had remained at the facility, their laughter mixing with the sounds of precision manufacturing. But these children weren't just playing, they were active participants in an educational program that taught engineering principles through hands-on involvement in humanitarian technology development. "Daddy, look," Maya called, holding up a technical drawing she'd been working on with Dr. Chen. "It's a flying ambulance that can land on water." Eli examined his daughter's sketch with amazement. The design showed sophisticated understanding of aerodynamics, flotation principles, and medical equipment requirements that would have impressed professional engineers. More importantly, it embodied the same humanitarian focus that had driven the Angel project from its genuine beginning. Dr. Chen approached with a tablet showing production schedules for the Angel aircraft now being manufactured under federal oversight. "Eli, the first 3 production models are ready for deployment. The Red Cross wants to station one in Central America for hurricane response. Doctors Without Borders is requesting one for their African operations, and FEMA wants to test one for domestic disaster relief." The new partnership contract that lay on Eli's desk represented everything Aurora had claimed to want but had never actually pursued. The Humanitarian Aviation Initiative was jointly funded by federal agencies, international relief organizations, and private donors who wanted to support technology that saved lives without threatening them. Eli's role as Chief Engineering Officer gave him authority over technical development while ensuring that humanitarian applications remained the program's primary focus. Frank Castellanos had indeed become the West Coast Service Center for the new organization, but on terms that preserved everything he loved about running a small auto shop, while giving him access to the most advanced aerospace technology in the world. Pacific Coast Auto Repair now serviced everything from compact cars to experimental aircraft, and Frank had never been happier. "You know," Frank said, wiping his hands on a shop rag while examining one of the Angel engines, "when I hired you 3 years ago, I thought your biggest talent was fixing transmissions. Turns out you're pretty good at saving the world, too." The legal resolution of Aurora's case had been surprisingly swift once the evidence of her deception became clear. The federal investigation revealed that her weapons program had violated numerous international treaties, her manipulation of investors constituted fraud, and her use of humanitarian cover for military development had endangered legitimate relief organizations worldwide. She was currently serving a federal prison sentence while the technology she'd corrupted was being restored to its intended purposes. But it was the personal resolutions that meant the most to Eli. Agent Torres, who had revealed herself to be genuinely committed to protecting civilians from military misuse of technology, had been instrumental in establishing the oversight protocols that ensured the Angel program would remain focused on humanitarian applications. Her partnership with Dr. Chen and Eli had created a model for how advanced technology could be developed transparently and ethically. Maya's teacher at the facility's school had noted remarkable development in her technical understanding and her ability to think through complex engineering problems. But more importantly, she'd maintained the moral clarity that had guided them through Aurora's deception. When other children asked her to help with projects that might have military applications, Maya consistently redirected their creativity toward humanitarian purposes. "Miss Maya," Dr. Chen said, reviewing the water landing ambulance design, "this aircraft could save lives in flood zones where conventional rescue vehicles can't operate. Would you like to help us build a prototype?" Maya's eyes lit up with the same enthusiasm she'd shown for imaginary flying machines, but now focused on aircraft that could actually help real people in genuine emergencies. "Can Daddy help too? He's really good at making engines work better." The romantic resolution between Eli and Dr. Chen had developed gradually, built on shared commitment to humanitarian engineering and mutual respect for each other's expertise. Sarah understood that Maya would always be Eli's primary priority, while Eli appreciated that Sarah's dedication to helping others through technology aligned perfectly with the values Elena had tried to instill in their family. Their relationship was formalized not through marriage certificates or grand gestures, but through the new partnership contract that established them as co-directors of the Humanitarian Aviation Initiative. It was a partnership that honored Elena's memory while building toward a future that served the greater good. Maya had started keeping a new section in her drawing journal sketches of the families that had been helped by Angel aircraft deployments around the world. Each drawing was accompanied by a story about how the technology had made a difference in real people's lives. Medical supplies delivered to remote villages, disaster victims evacuated from dangerous areas, emergency personnel transported to places conventional aircraft couldn't reach. "Look, Daddy," Maya said, showing him her latest drawing. "This is the family in Guatemala that the Angel helped when their house got flooded. Dr. Chen said we saved 3 kids who were the same age as me." Eli studied the drawing, recognizing in it the same humanitarian vision that had originally inspired Aurora before corporate ambition corrupted her intentions. But Maya's version was pure, focused entirely on the people being helped rather than the technology doing the helping. The final artifact of their journey was the new partnership contract, its legal documents that established the Humanitarian Aviation Initiative as an organization dedicated to developing advanced aircraft technology exclusively for civilian emergency response. The contract included provisions ensuring that any military applications would require unanimous consent from the Civilian Oversight Board, making weapons development effectively impossible. As evening approached and the workday wound down, Eli found himself standing where Aurora had once tried to convince him that military applications were necessary for humanitarian goals. The view was the same coastal mountains stretching toward the Pacific Ocean, but everything else had changed. The aircraft being developed here were designed purely to help people. The children playing in the hangars were learning that technology should serve human needs, and the adults working on the project were united by genuine commitment to humanitarian principles. Maya appeared beside him, her drawing journal tucked under her arm and her lucky compass pointing true north for the first time since they'd arrived at the facility. "Daddy, do you think Mama would be proud of what we're doing here?" Eli knelt beside his daughter and pointed toward the Angel aircraft, being prepared for its next humanitarian mission. "Maya, your mother always said that the best way to honor people you love is to help people you don't know yet. I think she'd be very proud that we're building flying machines that bring help to families who need it. And I think she'd be proud that you found Dr. Chen, because Dr. Chen helps you build better flying machines, and you help Dr. Chen be happier." The wisdom in Maya's observation reminded Eli that the most important changes in their lives hadn't been about technology or corporate intrigue, but about learning to build new relationships while honoring old ones, to move forward while remembering the past, and to use whatever abilities they possessed in service of something larger than their own needs. As they walked back toward their living quarters, Maya took his hand and asked the question that had defined their entire journey. "Daddy, if you saw someone who needed help and you could give them something important to you, would you still do it?" Eli thought about the work jacket that had started everything, about Elena's wedding ring that now sat in Frank's safe waiting for Maya to inherit it. about all the ways that giving something valuable to someone in need had opened doors to possibilities he'd never imagined. Always sunshine, that's what good people do. Maya nodded with satisfaction and opened her drawing journal to a fresh page. As they walked, she began sketching their next adventure, not a fantasy about imaginary flying machines, but a realistic plan for expanding the Angel program to help children around the world who needed emergency medical care. The journey that had begun with a simple act of kindness had led them to discover that sometimes the smallest gesture can indeed change everything, not through magic or coincidence, but through the way genuine compassion connects people across different worlds and creates possibilities that wouldn't have existed otherwise. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very determined, those possibilities grow into something that helps not just the people you set out to help, but everyone whose lives they touch along the way.